How we doing, folks? Can you all hear me properly and see me?
Yes,
Yep.
Yeah,
yes, Mark.
Excellent. Good stuff. Good stuff. How we doing numbers wise? Oh, we've 40 odd people in and six or seven with cameras on. Do you know those movies where you see these crypts in, with all the names on them on the walls? Oh, dear God. Anyway, how have you been keeping? It's been what, 2 weeks since I've spoken to you last. And
yeah, that's right.
yeah, and how? So, lots been happening in the supply chain side of things, and I'm not even going to get into. Right, let's get the show on the road, and everything is looking fine here from this end. Sound is working fine, video is fine, and we go down to your main page. And we are recording. Yeah, excellent. Um, right. And we need to do a couple of other tricks. Get out of the way, bring down your sides, open the deck, and enlarge it. There we have it. So, after the...
When you're recording, Mark, it doesn't have the thing up in the corner showing you're recording.
I'm not recording onto Zoom. Don't use that stuff at all.
Ah, right, okay.
Useless. If you've noticed from the videos, there's a lot more going on, and I record. Um, I have I have a system here. I have a couple of screens and cameras, and if I get a chance at the break, I'll try and find a video clip that shows it. Jesus, it's and the quality is better. So if things even break down with Zoom and so on and so forth, I can actually keep going here and keep the quality going and so on and record it, and then I push it out to YouTube. Why do we do that? Rather than because it's way too much hassle storing it on the Moodle site, and when you go to back up those sites at the end of the year, you have to download all movies separately, and so on, so on. It's too much like work, and I don't like creating work. I like to uncomplicate life, and YouTube is the quality is much better, and of course then you have easy access to YouTube, and you can watch them whenever, wherever you want on any device, and so that's why I created a separate channel just for online lecturing. That's the EduLect Live 2020 channel. That's where I direct you all to when you want to refresh yourselves on the videos and so on, and on the lectures, and diligently go through it minute by minute and take copious notes and so on. I am having a laugh, of course, you know. But anyway, where am I? Yeah, so let's get the show around to try and get a bit more work done tonight. And what I want to look at are relationships, supply chain relationships, and predominantly the relationships outside. This will all lead up towards one of the final lectures on what do we call it? Collaborations, and essentially how everything kind of seamlessly pulls together. So let's have a look at these learning objectives, as we call them. Look at the factors influencing outsourcing decisions. Now I'm not sure. I don't know all your backgrounds and so on, but no doubt there are people from both public and private sector, and invariably there will be people from the private sector who are in manufacturing and probably have. It doesn't necessarily have to be in manufacturing. It can be any industry where outsourcing is practiced. Fundamentally, most companies outsource their payroll for starters. It makes sense to do so, and a lot of companies would outsource HR. And I'll come back to this again because it's not just about supply chain. There's a whole bigger picture in this whole outsourcing, and valid reasons as to why you would do so. Why spend effort training people up on complicated systems, payroll systems, HR systems, IT systems even, when you can hire experts in and pay them a monthly fee and so on, and obviously write that off as well in terms of leasing and assets and so on. But yeah, it just makes more sense. More importantly, from a management perspective in an organization, or from an organizational perspective more precisely, you're focusing on what's known as your core competencies. And these are the things that you do well. So get rid of all this peripheral stuff, get it out, farm it out to other companies that specialize in those areas. That's their core competency. And just for you to maximize the utilization of your own assets, people, money, equipment, all that sort of stuff, and so on, for you to be able to maximize the return on your investment, essentially. I'm just turning off my phone here. Sorry about this. No doubt I would have stuff coming through. Yeah, there, job done. So that's outsourcing, and then we'll highlight the need for outsourcing with a view to globalization and the growth of international trade. International trade right now and outsourcing. Oh, dirty words combined, given the unholy mess Brexit alone has created. Okay, but we can tip in and out of that fiasco as we're going through the material. And so the outsourced companies, which can result in failure, and that's down to fundamentally not doing the homework. Why failure happens. Not having the right checklist in place, essentially. And then look at outsourcees, how they're selected. What companies, why would you go for this company as opposed to the other company, and so on. So some generic checklists that we can have a look at in our discussion on, and look at how the outsourcer and outsourcee relationships develop. And that's quite an interesting one, because you might think that you're getting a great deal from, now I'll name names, you might think you're getting a great deal from Eddie Stobart because he's so many, or used to have so many lorries on the road, and you see them everywhere and they're always immaculate and blah 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 blah, gives a portrayal of quality and lorries on the road, blah blah blah. But you get roped into that just because you might get a nice deal for 1 year, and the following year when you come to renew your contract, you might not be too happy. So you could have been just better served by sticking with the local guy. So really, and that's why relationships are important. So equally as we have to develop relationships with customers, we need to develop similar relationships, if not stronger relationships, with our outsourcee companies and suppliers and so on, so to keep this seamless flow going. Then we look at defining the integration and collaboration in the global context of supply chain, examine internal, external integration can be achieved to benefit supply chain performance. This is the age-old problem of the different functions inside an organization. Now again, I'm not going to take shots at any particular departments. Marketing. You would have the age-old, what am I looking up there? Jesus, Colin, sorry, you're putting the frighteners on me there. I see Trump looking over your shoulder. You should see what I'm seeing here. But yeah, the usual frictions can exist between marketing and supply chain management or operations. And the age-old argument, marketing want it all yesterday, and they want everything already done, dusted, and so on and so forth. And operations say, marketing, for crying out loud, what do you think we are here? Give us more definitive numbers. We'll produce as when you need them, and so on and so forth. And marketing, no, because that's just the basic differences and arguments that tend to go on in organizations, but we can get around those, and technology helps us in a large way in this case. So then we look at these internal, external. Now I have a nice little diagram from who was it? Pink Floyd. I reversed the Pink Floyd album cover. I'll explain that when we get to it. If you're of that vintage, it's iconic. So, and then we'll elaborate on specific methods used to enable collaboration. And then, of course, take the holistic perspective of supply chain to provide an understanding of how supply chains can gain greater integration and collaboration in the future. So, where this is fundamentally all heading in time. I think that's it. They're all there. So, what are the trends? Obviously, we talk about global competition, and and that's inevitable. I mean, we've been in this space now for the last 20 odd years at least, you know, and we've talked about it last week, you know, that, you know, technology has enabled us. And now we have even initiatives from Enterprise Ireland now looking for companies that are currently trading in Ireland that might have aspirations to trade abroad. So they have their offices scattered to the four corners of the globe with local expertise to enable companies to open up to new markets and so on and so forth. And to be honest with you, they'd be crazy not to take those opportunities because remember, we're only a small little island of what, just under 5 billion people or 5 million people. Jesus, billion, 5 million people. You know, it's the size of a small town in China. You know, but so and let's face it, right now doing business in the UK is an unmitigated disaster and a nightmare. Am I surprised? No. What I am surprised at, why the act wasn't gotten together much sooner. I mean, I'll show you a presentation I did 2 years ago, kind of related, but some of the fallout from it at the time in City West. And I was asked to speak at the supply chain conference. It used to be held around February, March. Obviously, it's not happening this year. But again, we were looking at, I was looking at big data and its impact on supply chain. And of course, I walked around to have a listen and earwig onto what was happening in terms of Brexit and so on, because I was particularly interested in that and to see how so many companies were literally dragging their feet on this one. So, you know, if I want to be the hard old bastard that I am, you know, it serves you right, you know, for not getting off the bench, you know. So, and then of course we're looking at global sourcing, and that in itself now that's a real stinger at the moment. You know, trying to find raw materials, components, or even products if you're an importer here in Ireland, from alternative sources. Again, I'm on record of saying, guys, you need to be looking at Eastern Europe. Seriously, you don't need to be going all the ways to China. What you'll gain on the swing actually outweighs the loss on the roundabout. In other words, bringing it in because it's slightly cheaper in China, you'll actually get higher quality product from Eastern European countries, and you will get some tremendous deals there. And it's still surprising why companies aren't looking in these spaces. Well, not that I'm aware of, and well, at least not doing so in earnestly. And the other problem with the sourcing. Today, our company was hit with a bill for €8,000, or it will be actually. We've been forewarned that we're going to be hit because of the shortage of containers. That's a load of horse's ass. That's just an excuse to extort more money out of me. I told you about this before, that you know, in certain jurisdictions they're charging containers coming in and going out and so on and so forth in ports, and I believe there's even a talk of haulier strike at the incompetence of the UK system to be able to process stuff and so on. And you know, it will become a little bit more evident that that there are holdups on the Irish side as well. And they're saying, you know, customers would say, oh, we're getting through 80% of our stuff is getting through without any bother whatsoever. It should be 100%, for crying out loud. 80% is just not good enough, you know.
Just a question on that, Mark. Is that not particularly bad, particularly unique to Ireland, because we are on the arse end of Europe and there's no land bridge, right? So what would traditionally have come over here on containers, you know, it's not a feature, not an issue really in continental Europe, because we see this week is that we see an absolute monstrous train coming overland from China into Eastern Europe, from where it's going to be unloaded and whatever into Germany. I think it's terminated, and stuck on the roads or on another train and dispatched around Europe. But for Ireland, it's particularly a challenge. It's kind of because of where we physically are that we you know, we're suffering worst.
Yes, I take your point, Colin, and it's a valid point. The problem is that, you know, at least 3 years ago, definitely 2 years ago, at least 3 years ago, when this all started to kick off, It was then we should have been putting our Cork port and Rosslare extensions and all that. They should have been up and running last year. Trial runs, test runs by last summer. Now they're only talking about building the one in Cork, or have started construction. They put on now. I know they were doing some work down in Rosslare. I'd seen. I was actually down there, and they set up some hoarding and all that for a drop off space as such. And commissioning more vessels to carry directly to Europe. It beggars belief that this is now a kind of a knee-jerk reaction. I mean, it was going to be obvious at this, and it's even complicated more that watch this space. This is going to get even worse. And the reason I'm saying that is that the EU are going to kick back against the UK. And of course, this vaccine debacle at the moment is going to make it even worse. The EU...
I'm struggling with the fact that unless you have an armada of ships to take then you're never going to substitute the volume that would come by Holyhead or whatever. They would typically come there. Now that it's not as efficient, if you like, now we have to substitute with the new ferry sailings from, I can't remember where it is, to France and other places.
Yeah.
So it's kind of I'm not really sure where you're going with this one because of where we're located, where we're physically.
You'd be the Port of Cork.
Yeah.
And like we're about to announce, we've announced making service started from Zeebrugge.
Yeah.
And equally it looks like the bridge service is going to start up. But the problem about saying capacity, no haulier was going to pay for it. So like, the hauliers are the ones coming on saying there's no capacity and this should be created. But until the 1st of January, not one haulier was going to ship these product or the receivers or whoever involved onto a ship that takes longer and costs more. That's the reality. Like the ports would suck up. They only love the business. Dublin Port is beyond. I think get that capacity for a number of years. Like what we call the land bridge is still Ro-Ro. It's still shipping, but it's just the Irish Sea. Such an easy route. It was cheaper. It was faster. And I said no one was prepared to pay for it until literally the trucks started to get stopped and the Holyhead that was the trigger for suddenly running to the rest of the board. So yeah, that's
running a truck down across Italy and that's whatever 7 miles to the gallon or whatever. It's fine.
Or she built a truck and a man in it is an awful lot cheaper. And the other thing with the Irish Sea was the resilience. So like if you were booking a box on the Irish Sea or Ro-Ro, if you missed the 5 o'clock ferry, there was probably one at 5:30 or 6:30 that you jump on. Whereas if you miss a Rosslare one, it might be the following night. Like our one was twice a week. So if you miss your Sunday service, you're away the next Thursday. So like that's why Ro-Ro quicker, which is like your company freight trucks, the Irish Sea and the land bridge is just. That was just too easy, it was too complex. So there's no way to
Yeah.
Sorry?
There's one running down to Spain now.
No, that way.
Yeah.
Again, it was more cost effective to put it into France, etc., and drive it down as opposed to very Spain.
But I'll just come in here. They're fair points because fundamentally what it comes down to is cost per kilo per mile or per kilometer. Or if you're going over sea, well, it's still measured in kilometer, even though it might be in knots. What is it? 5/8 of a mile or something like that. But regardless, if with more frequency, it'll all come down to pricing. And there is another dimension to this as well, or another way of doing this, and that's air freight. Air freight has come down. The cost of air freight has come down phenomenally in the last several years alone. Of course, it's not suitable for a lot of the bulk carrying and so on and so forth, but there are a number of products that can be and should be shipped using air freight for starters. But yeah, again, see, it'll come down to the size of market and choice, and whether is that going to drive up costs of in goods in Ireland? Probably. But what will happen? People just won't buy them. You know, it's if and then everyone is going to suffer all along the supply chain, and even the carriers, the freight handlers, the what you call hauliers themselves, and then indeed the shipping industry. There was a fantastic documentary I was watching last night on the cruise liners, if anyone would have seen that and so on. They're hemorrhaging $1 billion per month between three of the largest liners in the world. 1 billion a month. It's $50,000 a day to keep a cruise liner at berth in Southend in the UK. And that's why they tend to leave them out at sea, and even at that, it's still costing quite a substantial amount of money. So
online and social media, where they're selling off the ships, and they're
They
selling
are.
them for literal scrap value now at this
there,
stage.
there are a number of them scrapping. There will be a number of bankruptcies and so on in this whole area. So again, it's. But that said, during those times, they were making phenomenal profits. So that may then come back to the question that it'll become a bit of a price war once you start bringing in competition as well, which is healthy, I suppose, under normal free market conditions. But and then it's going to be, there's no doubt about it, it's going to be an unholy mess, and do you know who's going to probably suffer most in this? And that's the UK manufacturers themselves. They're already feeling the pinch. They're seeing products being delayed. They're seeing there are companies going out of business by the day over there purely because literally they've been sold a pup, and it's coming back to bite them. And as I said, layer that with all the complexities and the payback from the EU, and worse again, the payback because of the vaccine situation. There will be, I mean, people say, "Oh, that's unfair, Mark. People don't work like that." Are you kidding me? The stuff that'll be going, the comments that'll be said going on in the back rooms and so on and so forth, I'd love to be a fly in the wall, as they say, But in any case,
on the amount, like, there has to be a lot of the likes of fresh food and that's been scrapped as a result of the queues.
oh, of course, yeah.
I've seen like the likes of Marks and Spencer have empty shelves of fresh food because they get caught up in the whole logistics end of it.
Yeah. I mean, wasn't it, what strike was it? That was a fair few years ago. Was it the French or the Italians handlers had a strike, and the produce was dumped on the sides of the literally on the ports, on the docks, rotting away and so on, vegetables and stuff like that, and that's all you need is something like that.
So the French went on strike? That's unusual.
So anyway, let us fire down through here, because yeah. So we have, as I said, global presences, and that we talked about, and I mentioned the reference to the latest, from Enterprise Ireland and their initiatives to try and get people and get companies up and running and looking for markets. And of course, if you're going to be factoring in all of these costs. You're going to factor in, what's it cost me to get my product to other markets, and is it worth my while? I mean, these are basic business rules, and what do I need what should be my selling price, Then add on wholesalers and retailers, the rule of thumb is 20, 40, 40. So the manufacturer gets about 20% of the final price. Wholesalers can be anywhere between 20 and 40, sometimes more percent, and then the rest is profit on the retailers. And it does sound an awful lot disproportionate, but that's how we've allowed ourselves to be, and that's why Dell's model changed. Direct sales cut out all this. That's the guts of 50% of the costings, or say they didn't actually. They saved money, but they didn't drop the prices dramatically. They just made them extremely more competitive. Now, can we do this? I don't know. if, for example, you have, and this is the whole point about these collaborations, if you have enough hauliers and they can fill a ship 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a day, and if they're and the shipping companies can say these are guaranteed, and once you get to that levels of normal, right now it's in a state of flux, volumes and so on and so forth, until that settles down, then you might see some more give and take in terms of price, because anyone will run a ship if it's full and they can get a reasonable price, not massive profit. And if the manufacturers can guarantee, yes, this is what I'm supplying out to my European markets, and it's continuous and so on and so forth. This is the whole point about these relationships and the collaborations. It settles down and it becomes a nice fluid type system. But right now, clearly we're in the state of flux, and once we, as I say, get through when we don't have the customs issues and so on, but still, unfortunately, a large size of our market would still be in the UK. You need to look for newer markets for starters. You hedge your bets. You don't put all your eggs in one basket. It really is that clear cut. And similarly, I mean, we're importing products from the UK, and the manufacturer is already talking about moving out of the UK and setting up a European subsidiary to circumvent all the stupidity that's going on. They're already doing it. They're moving out, which is really, really interesting. They've got a German presence as it is. They're going to move their operations out of the UK. And that's the way things are, because they don't want speed bumps in their business and the way they've been doing business. It's just not paying them to export, and that's where it's going to start pinching a lot of the UK manufacturers, unfortunately. You saw what happened with all the motor companies and so on. But let's keep going anyway. So, again, global access to knowledge and new technologies, one of the bigger advantages. I mean, I use this as an example, being from down south, and probably some of you will be maybe close to my vintage, but growing up, we were led to believe that Waterford glass was the be-all and end-all of crystal, that there was nothing like it in the world. Really? I mean, Jesus, what they do in the Czech Republic and other places there in Europe is light years ahead. I mean, you got Waterford crystal. It was fine stuff. It was grand, and geez, I was in and out of the place several times. But I mean, these guys were already dabbling in colour glass and so on and so forth, but they had the technologies and so on, and some of the guys brought it back and when they set up the small cottage industries afterwards. Tipperary Crystal being one of them. What's the other one down on the Carrick Road? I think it's Tipperary Crystal. I can't remember anyway, all these small cottage type industries that set up eventually. And so the point is, global knowledge. You need to get out, and likewise, when you're going into a new market, it's absolutely critical that as a business owner, you get into that market and get to know the market. You don't go off and hire some local guy and let him do all the dealing. You literally get on a plane, well, post-lockdown anyway, and get out there and spend some time and get to know what the market is and get a real feel for it, and then start building one step at a time after that, and then putting your mechanisms in place to supply into that market as such. And then high level of customer awareness and expectation. This is the real kicker. As I said, this is fundamental economics. This is pull economics. You respond to the customer's demands and expectations. The days of manufacturing, building product and just dumping it there and actually they'll buy it anyway, those days are long gone. If companies are doing that, they're wasting money, pure and simply. Of course, there will be some levels of stock, along the pipeline, but not anywhere near the levels that there used to be, years ago, when it was a push type system. Now it's pull. Why? Because it's data enabled. And then fast rate of production and commoditization. Again, turnaround times, how quickly you can respond to changing needs of consumers and so on. And then, of course, last point here, supply chain expertise and innovation are preconditions for business success. So that last point pretty much says it all, you know. So and this whole area of supply chain expertise, the number of jobs alone in this whole area, data analytics again, also one of my pet hobbies. I like numbers. It's just phenomenal how they're using computer scientists in supply chain management, physicists and computer science and design engineers in developing transportation networks. Before you'd build basic network nodes, you know, you could do them with a pen and paper kind of thing. Not nowadays, just too much data, too many variables that you need to consider to be able to put all these mechanisms in place. So, for example, if you were now opting for the Cork route and number of savings and so on, you know, plotting efficient ways, alternative routes down there, by road, because we what have we done? We've taken up all our rail tracks and built greenways, you know. There was a great picture of Ireland when it was fully railed as such, you know. There's only a fraction of it there, but as the man said, you know, it would have been a bit of a help perhaps if they stayed in there, but at least the road network. Do you remember your man down, the president of UL below, Walsh, not Jack Walsh, I can't even Ed Walsh. He had one of these satellite photographs of Ireland at night, taken from the space station, and it was so simple. You could see all the population centres, and he overlaid it with the road networks, and all you could see were these roads going into Dublin. And he said, we need to have a huge corridor from Donegal virtually all the ways down through to the south, all along the west coast of Ireland. And he said, otherwise, he said, Dublin will just become the biggest car park in Europe. And essentially, so at least moves were going in the right way. It's taking us too long to put the proper infrastructure in place. But, you know, suffice to say, with those in place and then your access routes onto ships, you know, problem will be solved if with enough effort and focus on these. But the point about it is, in terms of supply chain expertise and innovation and using technology to be able to optimize the routes as such. And when we're looking at innovation here, and in terms of you know, the shape of the lorry, for heaven's sake, you know, the shape of the ship, any which way we can save a couple of pence per litre or whatever, it all adds up. And remember I mentioned, you know, BMW Efficient Dynamics. It's a compendium of small improvements here, there, and so on. They all add up to cost savings. That's where this whole concept of supply chain relationships and collaborations really comes to its own power as such. So what can each link in the chain contribute to reducing the overall cost and so on? Just let's focus here on this thing. So outsourcing, I'm going to fly through these, but there's only one thing that really kicks in here, and which is of real impact, and that's this concept of service level agreements. I don't know if you have been involved in service level contracts and so on, but you can be quite sure that they're being absolutely scrutinized right now over in the EU with the Oxford Azaranta, or what's the vaccine and so. Yeah, on
AstraZeneca, I think.
AstraZeneca, yeah, that's one. So they're looking at what was promised, what was agreed, and so on and so forth. Now we're getting all sorts of stuff being drip fed from us. I mean, and so I wouldn't pay attention to the half of it. It's just posturing and all that sort of stuff, and misinformation. You know, Irish Examiner coming out and all this sort of stuff first thing this morning, and I was saying to my wife afterwards, I said, you know, an hour later there was another statement from the company itself, and I said, you won't get the Irish Examiner coming, oops, we got it wrong, we apologise. Not at all. They jump on half information and so on. But you'd be quite sure that these service level agreements, and they're extremely important. They're a mix of legalese and operational data and metrics and so on. What's the compliance? Delivery times to be within if you're dealing with suppliers, you'll have a service level agreement in place that they will get the raw materials or components to you within, 2 or 3 hours of when they're needed on site and so on, or directly on time. And any deviations from that, there are penalties and so on. So they work down along the line. In many respects, they're a necessary evil, but more importantly, if you flip it on its head, there are very effective ways of trying to identify where are the inefficiencies in the system. So this kind of supports what we refer to, is value chain analysis. So where can we find subtle bottlenecks, subtle areas to make improvements and so on? So at micro levels, hence I use that terminology of efficient dynamics. Any little bit that contribute to reduction in lead time, because really the big question is, you place an order, you want to know how long is it going to take to get you. You really don't care as a customer what's happening on along the chain itself, generally speaking. And as I said, we talked about the tracking information, all that sort of stuff, and it keeps the customer involved so they don't lose us or become disinterested or cancel the order midway and all that sort of stuff, or return it because they've gotten something else, which is the biggest disaster you could have. And under customers' rights, consumer rights, and so on, they can do that. And then we look at these order winners and qualifiers. What actually, the criteria that are acceptable in terms of, this is these are the criteria that a customer or a supplier, if you're looking at a supplier as an outsourced partner as such, supplying stuff into you, what are they good at? So we have checklists we put down, and there's to use the science bit, we have what's known as analytical hierarchical processing, and commonly known as pairwise comparisons. And you take two variables and you keep working them out. Now, technically, you can work these out pen and paper, but if you have anything more than 3 or 4 variables, it'd take you days, if not weeks, to try and work out the permutations and calculations. So you have software that does this for you. So you can put in all these different variables, as many as you wish that you think that are important to you as the, we'll say, the customer, your company, and you want to outsource your transportation to a third-party logistics service provider, or indeed a fourth-party logistics service provider. You'll have these order qualifiers and these checklists and these metrics, and you'll weigh off a number of customers and evaluate a number of potential contracts. And I'll be coming back to these later on, but the point about it is that we use software, because the calculations and permutations, and then you end up with a net score, and whoever scores the best out of all these, that's who you award a contract to. No ifs and buts about it, because of the way the criteria are developed. That's important, and as I mentioned, we will come back to those. And then developing the supplier themselves, and that's more so in terms of feeding back the very basic, as I said, to get rid of to avoid the bullwhip effect, giving them access to your IT system so as they can see their product inclusion in your final product, to get a better feel for the rate at which you're using their products, so as they can start supplying directly into you, and within obviously the service level agreement, but they can be more efficient, rather than waiting for the phone call. Now, can you deliver us another lorry load of this sort of stuff, and then all panic breaks out, and so on and so forth. So that's why we have these you have enterprise resource management systems in organizations, SAP being one of them. And that's why we link all of these through technology, so that we can share data. And each company can have access only to that part of it. Similarly, as inside in the company itself, that HR would have access only to the HR module of SAP, and finance likewise. And then it's all password restricted and different menus for it. But it's fundamentally an operations and supply chain product, SAP for more efficient planning and so on. And then, of course, you have these creating virtual organizations. That's something like although it wasn't a virtual, but it's akin to the a smart organization that we talked about before, the Swatch Mercedes Art. I mean, who would have seen a watch company and a car manufacturer coming together, to come up with something, and that's what essentially it was. So they created a Sony Ericsson was another type that would fall into this virtual organization as such, virtual organization in so far as that one had communications technology, the other one had entertainment technology. Put the two of them together, and obviously Sony had a bit more in the screen technology and all that sort of stuff. Put the two of them together, and you have a product that really fascinated the and attracted customers. So they became winners all around. Not there today, but in the good days. So reasons for manufacturing outsourcing: reduce direct and indirect direct costs, predominantly the indirect costs. In other words, the stuff that you're not comfortable with doing, get rid of it. I mean, most companies are not transportation experts. So why would you bother? Why would you have a whole fleet of lorries and have to worry about, maintenance and so on for lease agreements and insurance, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff? Hire a transportation company. That's the kind of thing we're looking at, a kind of common sense approach to it, and of course the company, it still might look as though it's your company. Why? Because we're using a very simple technology. Wrapping. I don't know if you've come across or familiar with it, but some of the guys with their cars, they wrap their cars in this kind of plastic or vinyl, and some of them look at this matte finish and so on. Don't particularly like it, but they can do some phenomenal job. But that's all kind of fall down from branding companies and transportation companies, for example, wrapping their vehicles and using this wrap and advertising. So that all becomes part of the deal as well. So it's not just about getting the product, but also advertising the product. So these lorries are, they're owned by a particular transportation company, but they're wrapped in Mark Cashin's product logos and names and so on and so forth. And that's really inexpensive stuff to you can do it for a couple of €100 and you can wrap a van or a medium-sized lorry and so on and so on. But the point I'm making is that you outsource this stuff. You don't have to be spending the money and the worry and concern and so on and so forth with these non-essential stuff, insofar as it's not one of your core competencies. You might be brilliant at making carburetors. Do we still use carburetors in cars? Geez, I don't know. Suspensions in cars. That's your strength. Make suspensions. Outsource the transportation of those to someone else, and happy days. And of course, reducing that goes without saying, because if you reduce your commitment to assets such as transportation systems and all the management systems that go with it, and staff and personnel and space and carriages and so on, then of course you're reducing your capital costs. You're spending more money on direct production, and that's where you're seeing much higher returns on investments in particular companies, because it's not been clouded by these other issues. One great way, I picked it up years and years ago. DuPont, the pharmaceutical cosmetics company, they developed a system called the DuPont pyramid, which is a financial pyramid. And you could see from all the costs and ratios and ratio analysis inside an organization. It sounds complex, but it really, really isn't. Because you say, how much am I spending on marketing and administration versus how many products are being bought, for example, or how long does it take a product? So you're putting all these ratios in, but they're all interlinked, and you can calculate, your net, your bottom line figure and the impact of any of these. And then you have what's known as upper and lower limits, like any quality system. And if you go above a limit and say, well, the return on that spend for marketing administration is over the top. In other words, it's gone into the red, so you can see very, very quickly. So all these elements are built into systems, and it's just knowing how to understand and read them. And as I said, you can actually you can populate those yourself, even inside a spreadsheet. But it's always fascinating to see where the cost contributors or the cost causers inside an organization. And of course, in reducing taxes as a consequence because of outsourcing, because well, the volumes of how to say, yeah, the volumes of costs are reduced. Therefore, your taxes, VAT, incoming, outgoing, so you don't have to worry about that because you're only worrying about your returns on those sole components that you're using and manufacturing, and not all the other stuff. Reduce logistics costs, that's outsourcing. Tariff barriers, overcome tariff barriers again because you'd overcome tariff barriers simply by using, competent freight handlers. And most companies do anyway, but getting around those, and of course looking at the markets that you're selling into, that you try to avoid where there would be tariffs, and knowing those ones. So I'll reduce my costs. If there's a particularly higher tariff in one country, then you might decide to avoid that. It's not profitable enough for you. Or you might just partner with a local company and supply the materials to them and let them make your product on their license and so on. Whole range of possibilities. Better customer service, simply because you're now, how to say, what's the word I'm looking for? You're specializing. Management science, as they call it, or scientific management. You're going back to the 120 years to specialization, which can become a dirty word, but really it's what we fundamentally deal with. We have processes, we have inputs, transform, and outputs. And when we look at specialization, we find the best fit for those processes. And in the case of transportation companies, freight handlers, freight forwarders, and so on, you outsource. They know they're the specialists. They take all the worry and strain out of your transactions. That's why it becomes extremely important. It provide and of course then better customer service, because it essentially clears your deck. And once you have a clear visibility and there's transparency of what's happening from manufacturing, from supply to manufacture to wholesale, retail, and then the customer, it makes everyone's life an awful lot easier in terms of the visibility and better customer service. And then spread of foreign exchange risks. Well, that's that actually is an interesting one in development at the moment. For my sins, I must be an awful sinner. Jeez. I've just taken on a PhD student. She's a Polish lady, and she's looking at Bitcoin and blockchain technology. You might have probably have heard it been thrown around and so on, but its use in supply chain management. And the banks have been worried about the likes of Bitcoin. If I go off on a slight tangent, you heard about, or you might have seen the stories with Allied Irish Bank, Permanent TSB, KBC, and the other one, Bank of Ireland, the pillar banks. Anyone? Don't put up your hand if you're working for the banks. Anyway, the pillar banks, they were all applying for a license to introduce technology for money transfer. Another example of sitting on their hands. This stuff has been around for years, and these guys suddenly dawned on them. Oops, Revolut have 1.2 million customers in Ireland. I assume some people, or many of you, might already use Revolut. It cuts out the use of BIC and IBANs and all that sort of stuff. You just link your bank account, bang, and somebody else's Revolut account to transfer instantly. And it's extremely efficient. Yeah, UK based. But you also have, there's another German company, I think it's N26 or something like that, and there's a third one there. But the point I'm coming around to was that these banks saw the risk. Not so much the money transfer and losing out because they're too late to come to the table. The central bank have told them, on your bikes. This is apart from the fact that it appears to be collusion in the first instance, or they're too tightly wound. They're anti-competitive practice, not collusion. That's would be illegal to say that, but let's face it. But anti-competitive practice, that the forum were coming together and told them to on your bike, come back with a proper application, and we might review it then. The real worry was that down the road, here you have the likes of Revolut with 1.2 million Irish customers, who's a potential customer base that they could now offer loans to or mortgages to down the road. And this is what happened, nearly 20 years ago, give or take, a little bit less, with Bitcoin. People started to see the threat, and some federal agencies in the US started to attack it literally, and then they started to write laws and control Bitcoin and so on. For they can't. And that's why the banks have gotten in. And remarkably, if you're watching the news or listening to radios, you're hearing ads for gold and so on and so forth. Even the gold market is becoming a little bit nervous, and rightly so, because we've already broken from the gold standard. People would have seen gold as the go-to product to maintain value. That's not the case anymore. Bitcoin is gradually and has been slowly taken over, but the technology behind the Bitcoin, which is blockchain, has phenomenal track and trace type of technology, which now can they're already looking at it for animal products in terms of traceability of the actual animals themselves from birth to human consumption and so on. And it's just so easy to use. That's the whole point about it. So the old traditional things are beginning to change, and this, again, that's why when we look at these exchange rates and so on, these will become parts of the past. And really, at the end of the day, we're only down to essentially two currencies that we trade into. Well, if you want to include sterling, we'd say three, but the euro and the dollar. And already the last year, the Chinese and the Russians were even talking about ditching the dollar as their trading currency. Don't know what they were thinking of putting in place, but they are in serious discussions about offloading, maybe because of Trump and maybe because of the US, but they're beginning to say that that's the medium of transfer will change, and it's most likely Bitcoin. I meant to make this other point about Bitcoin. The banks are investing in Bitcoin as well. They're investing in terms of return for their shareholders and so on, because it's quite volatile, but it's limited, and it certainly is a good bet. If you feel about that, you can buy a bit of a Bitcoin for €20 or something like that, But the current value is $38,000 per Bitcoin. Anyway, so again, foreign exchange risks are definitely becoming mitigated, and of course, everything is electronically done anyway. So we don't have to worry too much about exchange rates. It used to be a big issue buying forward and so on and so forth and getting the right rates, and you could actually make profits on exchange rates. Very hard to do that nowadays. And then we share the risk. Of course, that's obvious. When you start bringing in more partners onto the chain, more and sharing and working as a seamless unit, then you're spreading the risk, right? So right up and down the chain and stuff. That's really all they're saying here. And then build alternative supply sources. That's a key point. You really need to have Plan B in place and Plan C in terms of suppliers. And indeed markets, because it would be unfair to say it's a cultural thing, but we tend not to be as proactive in wanting to grow and look for alternative markets and so on and so forth. Once we get into a routine, we settle down. Maybe I'm a bit harsh on ourselves in that. You correct me if you feel, but we tend to get stuck into this is nice and handy now, I've deal done with this guy, and we're making these are supplying the raw materials and everything's in place, and took a bit of a struggle, but we don't tend to want to look forward to whether it says 5, 10, 15 years down the road and say, well, I really need to spread my risk and look at alternative suppliers. What if this guy, are you actually monitoring your suppliers? I'm talking about beyond the service level agreements, because you need to see, are they capable of growth? What are their plans? What are their strategies, such that you can foster a relationship over a longer period of time and remove that risk from yourself and your operations? Because if you start to grow and grow faster than your supplier can commit to, then you've got a problem. They're going to slow you down. As I said, the processes only go as fast as the slowest beat. Okay. And then we alternatives. So preempt potential competitors. Again, these are all your basic management tools or business tools. Your Porter's 5 forces, your PESTLs, your SWOTs, and all that sort of stuff. Boston matrices, all these things that you. Here's a hint for you. How are we doing time is, and I'll give you this hint, and take this note, and I'll type it. I'm going to give you a great website if I didn't give it to you already. What countries in particular in East Europe? Any Eastern European countries I would go to. Right, a second. We got that there. Depends on how you want to pronounce it. You can say 12manage.com or 12manage.com. Okay? In that, you will find every business concept known to man and me. But every possible concept you could think of on in business. Now there's a free version and then there's the premium version. I would I pay for premium? No. Unless I wouldn't necessarily. But the beauty about that site is everything is laid out like the back of a book's index, A right through to Z, and numerically as well. So if you want to look at Porter's 5 forces, you go down under the P's and you'll see this, and you'll see examples, you'll see definitions, and you'll see examples. It's brilliant. I mean, lecturers use that stuff as well, for heaven's sake. But for your own benefit, if you ever come across anything or you want to get remember all these things, let's be academic about it for a moment. They're all what's known as concepts. Customer service is a concept. You can go in and you look them up. People have definitions, say what does it mean, and they're fairly generic and so on. So that site, for example, will show all of these. Supply chain management, get a whole range of stuff in there. All the different names refer to it as well, but they'll give you all the definitions. So it's a good site. Right, it's 8 o'clock. Coffee time. No?
Just a question before you
Yes.
do break for the break for tea, but going back to the slide you had previously on service level agreements. I mean, how many of those can really be effective or leverage really right now? With suppliers claiming force majeure, right? I can't get a truck to you. I can't get a container to you. Tough shit. I mean, most of them. I've been working with SLAs for donkey's years, but I mean, most of them do have sort of penalty clauses. But you can't. Even that aside, you can't really hold a supplier to, to metrics or to targets, to delivery times, delivery schedules, when the whole world has gone belly up.
Yeah. How would I go about that? I mean, it's as simple as this, for me anyway. I said, right, this is an issue. This is now a new bottleneck or a speed bump in the road. What do we need to do collectively to get around it? Does that mean that I'm going to have temporarily a little bit lull in my production to supply my products to customers and so on? And then you have to manage the customers, and customers' expectations. Most people are reasonable and know that there are these impacts on right across let's just say the Eurozone as a consequence of what's going on, and of course COVID and so on and so forth. So there's a certain amount of intelligent, reasonable behavior, and as long as you're informing the customers that look, we're going to be down on supplies, or we're having to cut back on supplies given the current constraints and so on and so forth. We will be back in full blah 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 in X period of time, and then you work at now what can we funnel through? What's the new supply agreement as such, and without breaking SLAs and so on and so forth. You rewrite them, because to be honest with you, what's the point in with SLAs? Do you try to enforce them legally and so on and so forth? Who wins? Nobody. Only the lawyers.
Point. Yeah.
So
the relationship piece, isn't it?
precisely,
The
it's
SLA
relationship, and it's
the relationship, as in because for the last year, this is kind of what I do for a living, let's say, right? And for the last year, nobody has really enacted force majeure, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Balancing act. If somebody's taking the piss, yeah, you start to leverage the SLA. If someone is legitimately struggling, it's relationship stuff, and you build a new supply plan, and you work to the new supply plan, and you kind of
yeah.
eke your way out of trouble, let's say.
Exactly, and as long as you don't treat it in, should we say, that link in isolation, and say, well, how can we influence the complete chain from start right through to customer, and we can say, right, we can shift this to adapt to the new. So that way, and the key, exactly as I said, the key point is the partnership arrangement and working together on the thing rather than getting into conflict mode. It just won't work. It won't work. Okay, folks, let's see. What time is it now? 8:05. Let's reconvene. We say 8:20. Okay, so a 15-minute coffee break, and I'll put on some 80s music anyway to keep you happy. All right, folks. See you in 15 minutes. Okay, folks, are you all back? Now,
Yes.
I'm in the way of this slightly. See how I can work this. No.
If you are with the headphones on, I will go inside. I will leave you to.
Second, just turn up the volume a bit. And rightio, folks. I'm going to try and make the best of this and try and stand up and get a bit of exercise while I'm doing it. Since the last time I was talking to you, I've had a knee operation, so it's uncomfortable sitting too long. Anyway, where are the violins? The orchestra, RT even. Where was I? I was down at down on these lower points down here, just here at this stage. So learn from local suppliers. Now, it was a kind of point I mentioned earlier on. Get to know, travel, get out of the. This is the basic premise that we talk about in what's known as the business model canvas. To keep shouting at you on that process. Get out of the building, and yeah, you do. You have to go and travel, meet your suppliers, get to know them, build up relationships, and so on and so forth. These things can't be done over video conference and phone and so on. Well, they shouldn't be, at least. And then gain access to world-class capabilities. It's always important to see. I don't know how many of you might have even worked abroad and so on, but it's always phenomenal to be able to see how, as we say, the other half does things. I would say I was fortunate enough to have traveled quite a bit with work and so on and so forth. But and you'll always hear the old rumors that, or the sayings that you hear more about what's going on at home than when you are at home yourself, particularly in your own organizations. But that's depends on the organizational culture and so on. So where am I now? I need to move at pace because I'm a little bit on the slow side here. Again, just very briefly, the outsourcing, the transfer. So in other words, put out specific processes, those non-core competencies. Now, I'll just very briefly, I think I might have mentioned, I can't remember, but usually companies have in around 6 to 8 core competencies. All the rest, now you'll have hundreds of competencies inside an organization. Anything from a person that's able to maybe use WordPress to write word design, or can speak multiple languages and all this sort. These are all skills and competencies. But directly in your own organization, there are things that you're good at because the data will validate that. Certain manufacturing techniques, processes, equipments, bespoke equipment, and so on and so forth. These are things you're good at. Anything else putting it bluntly, is a distraction. Get rid of it. Put it out. So outsource it. Finance, HR, IT, insofar as you can. That you don't feel that don't compromise any part of your operations. In other words, that would make it easier for a competitor to pick up on. Okay, that's the critical point. So anyway, this is where we look at the offshoring, and you know yourself, if you're offshoring, I mean, the huge temptation is, you know, head towards China and so on. That's all very fine. You can go out there and so on. But if you put all your manufacturing into one plant, as I said before, the propensity for copyright and intellectual property breaches as such, you know, just goes off the scale. So you might have certain components made in one factory and so on. So it doesn't necessarily have to be China. It could be any country you're dealing with and so on. You don't put all your and do final assembly, you know, in another jurisdiction or another location or at home, whatever the case may be. But fundamentally, if you want to be a little bit more protective, the counter to that, or one way of getting around those issues, is another technique that I developed many years ago and borrowed it from the Canadian timber industry of all places, and that's roadmaps, technology and product services roadmaps. I if I remember to do so, I'll show you a sample of one. And they really are very simple, but the whole idea is you always stay one step ahead of the competitor by trying to come out with the next generation, and not give them enough time to catch up on them, because they will find out how you're doing things, and they will copy, and they will come up with their versions of it. So the idea is that you have, well, I'm planning already my next generation of what this product is and service and so on. That's how you mitigate these risks and so on. So in other words, you're not sitting back on your hands and on your current glories and success and so on and so forth. You're constantly evolving and developing and growing and remaining sustainable in business. This is even too far for me to read, but you know, lower costs is one of the reasons. You know, less stringent regulatory, and of course these are all the givens. You know, it's, I mean, once you start going outside the EU and in terms of compliance and so on and so forth, rules can be and laws can be a little bit more lax. Point in case, you know, why does most of our clothing manufacture happen in, for example, in India? Because it's relatively easy to pollute the rivers and so on and so forth and just run off the wash and so on and so forth. Whether that's condoned or not and is a whole other issue on morals and ethics, and hence the whole growth of corporate social responsibility, blah 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 blah. But and then, you know, the issues around, would you buy runners if you know it was child labor manufacturing of runners? Really? How many people would think, Jesus, they're a lovely pair of Nike runners? The poor 11-year-old that made those for me, I'm not going to buy them because he was 11. I might sound a bit harsh and so on and so forth. You want something that looks good on you, whether it was made by an 11-year-old or a 22-year-old, as long as you're able to get them at a reasonable price, 150 or 200 euros, whatever stupidity to pay for them and so on. That's what matters, unfortunately. But nevertheless, from an organization perspective, you want to be able to reduce the cost, return on investment for shareholders, maximize your profit and so on. That's the name of the game. It's driven by numbers. And then, you know, lower communications and IT costs and so on. Of course, if you're outsourcing and so on, that might be one of the functions you would actually outsource itself. And what to say, improving capabilities in many offshore regions, and that's an interesting one, because essentially what's happening is that the more and more companies are, and over time they're building up better relationships, better expectations, and it does become a genuine partnership with you know, companies at the other side of the world and so on. So you do build up this these capabilities, and you probably able to impart some techniques that you're using, or evaluate their techniques and come up with best solutions for developing your products to be shipped back to Europe or whatever your market might be. And cluster of specific activities, call centers and so on, they were some of the interesting, they all started to revert back again because well, you know the whole stories and all these and so on and so forth. People just felt frustrated. It was more of a psychological thing, dealing with particularly India. You know, not to single out any particular, but you know, it just didn't feel right, because you felt you weren't getting the right help and people's perception. The other side of the world, how in the name of God can they help me and so on and so forth, here in Ireland and so on. And those idiosyncrasies were the triggers to start bringing back, and places like Rigney Dolphin and Waterford and so on for these companies exploded in terms of popularity and outsourcing for customer services and all that sort of stuff, you know. But now again, even taking those steps further, technology's even improved on that. So a lot of the time you're dealing with AI and bots and so on and so forth, that there isn't a person there at all, you know, and this, the websites have become a lot more self-help and so on. So they're constantly improving that level of support. Again, if it's being done by a machine, well and good, you know, if most of the questions, and this is the whole point, they can actually extract and create these meta levels of data and say, well, what if someone asked this question and so on. So the intelligence of these machines are so advanced that they can extract bits from other queries and so on and actually give a cogent, understandable response to certain queries and so on. It's getting there. It's a bit to go yet. And then here's the most frequently reported problems with the failures. And if we look at these here, you know, general responsiveness. Now, again, you could nail that down under SLAs and so on and so forth. But again, understanding, you know, when you're dealing with other countries and cultures, it's important to understand their cultures and so on and so forth, which can cause or can contribute to even holidays, you know, not knowing what time of the year is certain holidays and close down, which is often overlooked in terms of when we look at the total lead time. And then you're jumping up and down and say, well, God, we didn't know about this and we didn't know about that. And you're wondering why a delivery is delayed or production is stopped in the country for a period of time. And so because it's a national holiday over there, or it's a, you know, Ramadan or whatever, you know, is going on and so on in various countries. So being aware of these things, you can reduce the I should say the anxiety levels and reframe your actual expectations and then manage the customers. And this is the whole key point to it, is how you manage the customers. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, you know, but general reliability, these can actually feed in, even though these are I would say, data-driven surveys that cause failures as such, you know, mistakes, errors, and not having clearly communicated requirements or expectations, you know, fundamental project management. If you don't have clear requirements, you know, how in the hell can you expect people to understand and deliver exactly what you want? Likewise, as a manufacturer, you need to know what your actual customers are looking for, otherwise they won't buy it, and you're wondering what the hell, because you weren't listening to the customers. Same thing here. You know, so if you go right through, you know, was it what am I reading there? Difference in culture. I already mentioned that. You know, customer complaints and so on, so on. Quality inconsistencies or consistencies in this case. So all of these. So these are the generic reasons for failures and so on. These can all be effectively addressed in the next piece here when we start to look at the criteria for evaluating and selecting. So we look at these things like reliability. Now these, remember I mentioned this analytical hierarchical processing and pairwise comparisons and also, that's only a snapshot. There could be many more of these criteria, you know, delivery time, financial capability. For example, you know, if you're going to outsource, are they going to be around in 12 months, 2 years, 5 years time? You know, what's their balance sheet like in terms of them you know, and their growth, because you know, it has to be in sync with your expectations. So if you're looking for a transportation company that currently has 3 containers, for argument's sake, and within the next 2 years you're going to be pushing out 6 and 7 containers worth of product per day, and they still only have the 3 containers, it kind of spells should set the alarm bells. But if they know that you're going to be using 3 and 5 containers in time, then it's possible that you could finance them or help them to build their company, because you're again, it's this partnership you're building. You're building reliability into the system, that guaranteed transportation system that will meet your needs. So you might end up collaborating with them. It might be easier for you as a bigger organization to get access to cheaper finance and then use this as a collaboration and a tool and let them pay back. I mean, that was very common during, I know during the last financial or the financial meltdown and so on and so forth. Companies couldn't hit their debts yet, and I'm talking from our own company experience. Customers couldn't pay, and you know, do we put their accounts on hold? What purpose was that serving? We would have been sitting with stock. They need the stock to be able to keep customers coming in to generate income. So we said, right, we'll take stuff off hold. Let's put a payment plan in place for you. A simple mechanism. So we worked with them to reduce their balance over time. Okay, we wouldn't get the profits in that we would have normally be getting in on a per month, but we built, and we still have those customers today. Simple common sense approach, and trust, that becomes a big issue. And as I said, those customers are still in existence. I mean, you will get burned. Let's face it. There are cowboys out there and so on. So you can account for that in many respects. Financial, performance track records. Show me the numbers. What's your past performance has been like, and so on, and your compliance with previous SLAs and so on and so on. Price cost reductions. How can that be a shared mechanism? So if these guys are supplying three containers per day at 6,000 euros, and because you're able to guarantee work and use and expand their business with them in collaboration with you, they might be reducing to maybe 5,000 per 3 containers and so on, because they're now going to be supplying 4 containers, 5 containers, and so on, so on. So again, unresponsiveness to demand uncertainty. That's the real bugbear. That's the real challenge in there, because what is the demand? How long is a piece of string? Not altogether that mysterious, because again, data. When you're analyzing and you're seeing trends and you're watching trends and you're analyzing your customers, and that's the function of marketing. More specifically, the technology in marketing, customer relationship management technology, these CRM systems. These are seriously, some of them are seriously advanced technologies. They can make all sorts of predictions and are pretty accurate, and they are using AI in a lot of these systems now. It's in one of the slides, and I'm not going to get to it tonight, but this company I mentioned to you before, Otto, have a look at them and look at the case study. I might actually have the PDF of the case study up on Moodle sites, or the story of them and how it all came to be. But it's phenomenal how they use a kind of AI technology to be able to predict consumer behavior. And God knows, what was I doing yesterday? Oh yes, I was giving out about Intel processors and the fact that I need to get a more powerful processor to be able to multitask on one machine without buying a second machine, all that sort of stuff. And I was talking about core processors, i5, 7, and 9, and so on. And what happens this morning? You guessed, I get media pushing out to me on several streams, comparisons using game technology against the AMD versus the new iCore 9 10800 processor and so on, and so I start, because our systems are listening to us, our phones are what's her name is next door, not the wife, the other one, Google, yeah, and then downstairs Alexa, and so these are listening to what's going on in conversations. And try it out for if when you have time to spare, talk about something obscure and wait and see what happens. You will start seeing stuff on your feeds coming through. The systems are picking up, but we're using those systems we're using that information to profile people, profile customers as much as we possibly can, get all sorts of data. And with that, armed with that, then we can actually be more certain about potential demands. And in the case of Otto, they can actually create the demand for the product before the consumer actually orders the product. Sounds totally Star Trek stuff and so on and so forth, but actually not, because they've been analyzing patterns and patterns and patterns. Why? Because they've been their technology was used to analyze the atom splitting, or whatever they call it, the Hadron Collider down in CERN, and all the permutations, and because they're such advanced technologies and so on, now they can easily simulate it into behaviors, just change the categories and so on. And then record of corporate social responsibility. When you're dealing with suppliers, it's a reason it's last on the list. It's last on the list. Nevertheless, that's not to say that I'll brush it off and say that yeah, that's all very fine. But it's becoming a considered variable. How green are they? How efficient are they? And so on. How much renewable energy are they using? And so on and so forth. The agendas have been pushing that in, and it's now, how to say, earning its place. Is that the right phraseology? As part of the selection criteria. At least companies will include it in there to be seen. I won't say to pander to social pressures and so on and so forth. They are real, okay? But nevertheless, it's a consideration and can be. It wouldn't be a deal breaker, I'm quite sure, but it certainly would be a consideration. Now, again, this is just a simple flow chart, but and I like it because it is a flow chart. Couple of states, a decision state. Are you going to go ahead or not? If you're not, then forget about it. If you are, then you go through the following steps and so on, and you have various decision boxes and so on. And that's all it is. What if we do this, we do that. But at least it's in this case it's only a generic one, but it's a project methodology for all intents and purposes. Clarify what do we want to do or not do. Move on to the next state. It's like programming language, computer programming language. If we don't do A, we do B. There's only one flaw. Well, there's a couple of flaws in that diagram in terms of logic flow, and that's in around here you have a decision box, yet there's no decision being made as such, and you normally branch out. But in any case, you get the idea of it. It's a pragmatic sequence of steps to take, and that's the whole point of it. You slow down and you try and assimilate as much as possible before you come up to final decisions. So you have 4 stages in terms of this, and the relationship development. You have the master servant, and then the consultative stage, peer-to-peer, and then finally the competitive stage. And really, if very simply take it, you're the manufacturer, you're looking for a transportation company, you're the master and they're the slave, they're at your beck and call for all intents and purposes. But eventually we start to consult and say, is there some way we can reduce our costs, and say, well, what do we want to look at? Or improve our lead times, and if we can improve our lead times and so on, there's a cost benefit to all of us. So we can reduce maybe some of some parts of the transportation process, some stages inside that, and we can actually guarantee and have the products absolutely packed, ready, and literally shipped onto a container, or maybe we preload a container, you just come in and take it from us. All sorts of different mechanisms you can put in place. But you do that through consultation. What can you do? What can we do to improve the flow across? And then peer-to-peer relationship, where you're literally treating them as equals as such. And finally, the most important one is competitive stage. Now, what can we do jointly to improve the overall customer satisfaction in terms of delivery, the quality of the product? For example, that 100% of the product has 100% quality, leaving the place, and it arrives in the same state to the consumer in a shorter period of time, and all this sort of stuff. What do we need to put in place to get these? I mean, that's very utopian approach on it, but nevertheless, it's aspirational. I don't know if you've done economics, or I don't know if it's on your post, but this whole concept of perfect competition and all that sort of stuff, and you have perfect competition, imperfect competition, then you have duopolies and monopolies, but perfect competition doesn't exist. It's this aspirational point in economics that we all wish to achieve, where every customer is happy and every supplier is happy and everyone's happy with the price and the quantities and so on and so forth. Pure heaven. It doesn't exist. It's just a benchmark, but we strive to hit those types of levels. Hence, we have all these initiatives in place: continuous improvement, Six Sigma, blah 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 blah, and so on. This is the same idea here, getting to that competitive stage where you now have a perfectly equal operating micro system between you and your outsourced partners as such. Now you're all working collectively to try and either compress the lead times, improve the quality, get the quantity, look for new markets, and leverage off their capabilities. And would there be technologies that, for example, in transportation that could be used in manufacturing? Of course there is. it could be simply a traffic control system or some kind of what they're using over in Ocado, air traffic control transportation system, and used to route products around the warehouse and so on and so forth. So they're leveraging off each other, because these guys are specialists in transportation. They're specialists in that area. So is there anything that we could learn from them to help us improve the way we're actually manufacturing our process and layouts and so on? Okay, time now to go on and sit down again and to this level here, bottom left, and right. So integration embodies various communications channels and linkages with supply network, of course, and integration should not be confused with collaboration. So and the integration, the collaboration is the how to say, the marriage. The integration is the engagement. So we start to because that's where you need to use that phase as such to take all the bugs out of the systems, and start identifying the compatibilities. It's like two computer systems talking to one another. They have to have a common language, and once you start getting the common language, things start to work, and the channels open up a little bit more, and the systems begin to become more effective. And then of course integration is the alignment and interlinking of business processes. One example is when we were supplying into when I worked with Technomen, supplying prepaid systems into Brazil. We were only able to go to so many million subscribers, and after that you had to get the big guns in, Nokia in this case. So as part of the deal and that collaboration as such was the integration. So we had to literally go through our process, our testing process, our decommissioning process, and their installation process, and make sure that everything ran smoothly from the customer's perspective, which would in this case would have been the operators, so that they could say, they could trust us to get the job done. So we dovetailed all our systems and all our process and how we how to say, install and decommissioned our systems and so on, and backups and storage, blah 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 blah, and put what kind of fail-safe mechanisms we're putting in place such that there was no out of service. That was the expectation of the customer. So collaboration between supply chain partners develop over a period of time. That's a throwaway comment really, because it does take time to develop things. The speed at which they're developed is the real measurable or a focal point of that. How quickly, and of course, like any relationship, you don't want to move too fast because you'll make mistakes. And as long as you have multiple perspectives from the different functions within the organization, so you might look from the operation side, everything is happy down here and so on and so forth, but the IT might not be happy, or sales and marketing might not be happy. And I haven't even touched, and nor will I be touching, the whole area of politics. Well, if they're merging with us, why do we need two marketing people and all this sort of stuff? Whole other discussion. Leave that off to your HR module and so on and so forth. They can sort out that mess. So integration as an enabler of collaboration. So it does. Once you have things working and interworking smoothly, then we can start to collaborate, because it frees up time, it frees up resources and energy and so on, because there's quite a lot goes into integrating things and getting things to run smoothly. And once that happens, then you're moving on. And this is just basic stuff. Forward, backwards, horizontal, vertical integrations. You're working with suppliers, raw materials, component suppliers, then you in the middle as a manufacturer, original equipment manufacturer, then you have the freight forwarder, then you have the reseller or the wholesaler and so on and so forth. So sometimes traditionally we would say, buy your suppliers and have a complete. There are very few companies in that, how to say, I won't say luxury state. BP would have been one of them, where they obviously they drilled for oil and they sold it themselves. I don't think that works. No, it doesn't. No, but generally speaking, that type of industry can work all right. Who the Norwegians that first came into Ireland? What was the name? Not Topaz. Before Topaz. Oh Jesus.
That oil.
Was it Statoil, was it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they drilled and I mean, they would have owned virtually the complete supply chain. But I mean, they offloaded all the retail outlets. So it was Topaz, now it's what's is it Apple Green now? Is whatever? I lost track, and I keep changing their names. But so they divested those areas, and well, they didn't need them. It was just they'd made their money off of us, cheap oil, gas. Oh God, I'd be shocked for saying things like that. Anyway, moving on. Supply chain integration. So internal integration. Now this is where some of the fun starts inside. So how do you get things working inside in your own organization? Can be achieved by structuring the organization and the design or implementation of information systems for improved communication and so on. So non-value adding activities are minimized. This is where the concept of value chain analysis comes in. And really, it sounds like a challenge, but it's really this simple. You have processes. Are you using them? Yes or no? If you're not, get rid of them. Are we using them? Yes. Do they need to be improved? No. Leave them alone. Or alternatively, yes. Simple questions. Are they contributing? Do we need these processes in the step? So you're constantly reviewing all your processes and so on, and trying to cut out wastage. That's it's the what do they call it? It's Kaizen, but there's the other name for there's 7 wastes or something like that. Oh, geez, I can't remember what they are. It's getting late at night. So we look at non-value, costs are. Sorry.
Your slides went a little blurry. They're not as sharp as they were.
No, why is that? I wonder. Hang on a second. Is that the case with everyone, or just? Can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, not to worry, Jill. You may have the pleasure of looking at the video again.
Mark, are these up on Moodle? Are they?
They are actually, yeah.
Slides?
Yeah, they are indeed.
I couldn't find them when I went looking for them. I was just wondering where they were.
Most definitely up there. Hang on a second. I'll just pause and I'll go into Moodle and I'll give you exactly where they are. Okay, so we are.
Yes, thank you.
Not at all. I'm looking at the other camera. There you are. So where am I now? Lead time, service quality is improved, and then functional silos are reduced. One of the ways, okay, functional silos, what the hell are they? Marketing, operations, finance, HR, IT, administration, corporate affairs. These are all generic functions inside an organization, and often referred to as silos. And unfortunately, they exist. One of the ways, one of the more effective ways of mitigating and removing these obstacles is the organizational structure. Again, outside the remit of this topic, but I do teach it elsewhere. But it's organizational structures and behaviors. One way are matrix organizations, and particularly if you're using product matrix organization. So you have all the necessary functional expertise needed for that particular product line. Some people will say, well, there can be a lot of duplication. It's a balancing act. But if you want to improve efficiencies, definitely product matrix or project matrix style organization are far more effective in terms of developing. And indeed, many manufacturer companies would have had that. If you take any of the large companies, you'd have particular product lines for business level, consumer, general consumer level, and then within the business levels, you'd have multiple layers of product lines inside there, because they were serving different markets, different niches, different customers, and so on. So, and it enables you to focus down more. And the more you focus down on your markets, the more precise you can be about who your customers are and what their needs are, and develop those. And that gives rise then to another one of your concepts inside there. Your Boston Matrix. You can see it on 12manage.com, where you have thanks, Yvonne. The cash cow, rising star, question mark, and dog. Okay, and based on that, then we do these in companies. Normally, you know, well, what's the point in keeping a dog going, a product that's just about holding on by its teeth kind of thing? Get rid of it. It's a drain on your resources. Question marks. Then you have to decide, you know, and do a thorough investigation. Do we dump it? Is it a common dog, or has it potential to become a rising star? And that's where you start putting your efforts in and so on, you know, into. And if it's a rising star, the idea then is you convert it, you push it to become a cash cow, so it's almost self-sufficient, and it's generating income for you, and thereby enabling you to invest more and more R&D. That's another functional area, R&D. But put more money into R&D, developing the next generation, and so on, so on. Hence the whole point I was talking about earlier on, the roadmap approach. Okay, so that's how you can reduce these functional silos, by putting an appropriate organizational structures. Now, unfortunately, some companies would have these org charts and organizational structures, and they do it maybe every 2 or 3 years, just for the sake of ruffling up things and not letting people settle in too easily, you know. And this is my lovely diagram. You recognize it. It is Pink Floyd, isn't it? Is it Dark Side of the Moon, or I can't remember. Yeah,
It is
that's
Dark Side of the Moon, yeah.
But you notice the difference in it. It's inside here, it's reversed. We all did this experiment when we were in primary school. The rainbow effect, you know, you take your 2 lenses on either side and blah, 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 blah. Well, really, this is what an organization is. That triangle inside here, this is your organization. You bring in all these different functional areas and skills represented here. And if you get them properly focused within the organization, you end up with white light coming out. In other words, you have a concerted effort, and everything, you end up with a totally different thing coming out here based on the inputs here because of this. All comes down to this. Now, if you have this again flowing into the next prism and so on and so forth, and ultimately you end up with your white lights coming out and so on, then you have a perfectly balanced system. That's the whole point. It's that simple. But I just like that concept, of the fact that unfortunately in organizations you might have a predominance of red. You know, it depends on what the flavor of the month is, and you know, or the flavor of the period is. You know, and rather than having a concerted effort, you can have a little bit of posturing and so on and so forth. And you know, no, I'm not singling out any particular area, but you know, marketing might feel they're more important than others and so on, or HR might feel that they're more important and so on. That fundamentally comes down to an issue for leadership, to be honest with you, you know, and how to mitigate that and to devolve that type of culture or behavior inside an organization. Now, I've kind of lost the plot with HR. HR has gone off in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways and so on, and created all sorts of things there and so on. It's hard to keep in touch with what they're dreaming up half the time. But generally speaking, they are it's an important function. It's not about people, it's a function, obviously, inside there. Clearly it's one of the benefits of value chain analysis also is that what are these contributing, because you know, it's they all have to be adding value, not, even though, you know, on the surface you might say, well, what are HR doing to add value? What are finance doing to add value? Well, it's pretty obvious, you know, hiring the right people, keeping motivation going, keeping culture support inside the organization, blah, 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 blah. And same for finance, producing cost reports and all this and so on. So that's the mechanism. They add value to a company. So if you were to take, I did have another example of it years ago, but if you take a raw material coming in, a roll of aluminium, how do you end up with it now, the A6 or A5 in it? So where are all these functions adding value to it? That a roll might have cost, you know, a couple of €1,000, and by the time you're selling the car or sold, you're spending 40 or 50,000 euros. So you're adding value to it. They shouldn't be seen as cost centers, but value adding centers. And that's not any of this political bullshit sort of stuff. Like, there was one guy came out some years ago. They didn't, you know, the SWOTs we have: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Some guy tried to be politically correct and said, oh, we don't have weaknesses. We have not so strengths. And I said, you didn't really think that one through, did you, Sham? when abbreviated. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff yeah. Unfortunately, that was dismissed pretty quickly. Anyway, where am I? So that was the whole point. Internal integration is how well you identify the contributions from each of the different functions and the interlinkage. Again, fortunately, technology helps us. The SAPs, Oracle, Sybase systems, and so on, they help us to integrate more effectively, and we can measure the value contributing in each of these areas. That's that version of it was this is what we like to happen, but unfortunately it goes out the other way. But this is what should be the case. You know, all these different capabilities coming together to produce an organization is just a collective of people. So external, electronic data interchange, your systems, your EPOS systems, and so on and so forth. So in other words, your IT systems, your bleeper at the counter, feeding all the ways back to the manufacturers, to the suppliers, ultimately, and the systems do talk. Otherwise, you wouldn't have the efficiency you need. Streamlines information sharing and storing, effective, efficient organizations, and Keiretsu. Organizational equipment or original equipment manufacturers work closely with their first-tier suppliers to integrate manufacturing, logistics, and so on, closely with the second-tier suppliers. So again, it's the chain effect, and you're integrating all your systems. That's how, from day one, when I was telling you about how to remove the bullwhip effect, is literally through technology, communication, feeding the information back. Your first tier supplier and second tier supplier further back, if my hand come back into the screen, further back, they only need to see those components of their suppliers being used in your products. They don't necessarily need to see your sub-assembly or final assembly. They only need to see their element coming in, but they get a picture of what's happening, because they know that the second tier supplier knows that the first tier supplier has visibility of your manufacturing, which in turn you have visibility of wholesale, retail, and all the retail outlets. So you actually see the information all the ways back. Everyone's happy. But when the systems are not integrated, then that's where you run into difficulties. So obviously, and this is the whole point of it, just-in-time line-side delivery, assembly plant, seamless lean supply, and then total supply chain is viewed as one extended operation. That's the holy grail of it at the end game. It takes work, unfortunately. So collaborations depend on the provision of mutual benefits, and really this again, it's what gains can we make, mutual gains, and how can we pass them on? Sometimes you might not make any gain, and you might be able to pass on something to your supplier. It could even be a simple thing like a reference or a guarantee to another manufacturer who isn't in your space, and so on and so forth. But there's that kind of networking built up, but it's important, as long as you don't shoot yourself in your foot, and get priced out of the market and so on. So trust is the main issue in all of this, building up that relationship. It's the same in any part of business. I'm not going to go through this anymore, because I'm sure you've all come across this simple game and so on and so forth. The dilemma you face is, do you trust your partner to make the same decision as you? It's what's that celebrity? What's that game? Husband or wife game, is it, or whatever it is? You go on. How well do you know your other half? That's the modern day version of the prisoner's dilemma, and of course there's it's probability theory of things happening or not happening, and but you can build it up. You can use these mechanisms. You can use there are other far more advanced systems, complex adaptive systems, chaos theory, and so on and so forth. You can take subsets of that to try and come up with mathematically the probability of a relationship succeeding and so on. But that will all be predicated by the number of variables and conditions and so on that you put into the software to be able to derive a conclusion that's mutually beneficial. So the journey from the open market negotiations to collaboration. Open market negotiation, cooperation, coordination, and then final collaboration in this case. So the supply chain integration, joint planning, technology sharing, and even going beyond technology sharing, it's product development. So in terms of the collaboration, I used the example before of if you're developing a new car and your R&D guys and design engineers inside and in BMW want to have these super duper lights and all this sort of thing, ultra slim and so on. They don't have the expertise, but they might talk and collaborate with who is it, Philips or Bosch or one of these companies that manufacture head units as such, and they'll know all the requirements, the legal requirements, and then they need to develop technology or new types of LEDs coming out, and they might talk to other manufacturers of LED technology and so on. So you have this collaborate, because there's no point in the BMW or Mercedes or Volkswagen design engineers having to go out and take courses on developing headlight units. So before they come to final, they'll talk with potential suppliers and their suppliers as well. Is this possible? And I'll come down, and that's why and that's how quickly we prototype these. So that kind of next generation development, that's the next step beyond the kind of collaboration, this in partnership structure. And then we have the two dimensions of the collaboration applied to transportation management: vertical collaboration, transportation management, external collaboration with the suppliers, internal collaboration, and external collaboration with the customers. That could be a simple thing of click and collect. For distribution. Come to our plant, we'll have the products ready for you to put onto the back of your lorry and bring to your distribution center and so on. Could be something simple as that. And then the other one is external collaboration, other organizations. That's an interesting one. There was a concept came up a number of years ago. Ages ago, 90s I think it was, and but I liked it, and it was simply this: what do you call it? With technological developments and internet and interweb and all that sort of stuff, newspapers. Stop me if I've told you this already. Newspapers in New York could see the threat of the internet, and they collaborated. Didn't tell you that story, no? Just bear with me one moment here. I'm just watching something here. I need to change something here. Just stay with me. Turn off that and turn on that, and I'll come down to this. Technology for you. What about it? Literally just change cameras with a switch. What was happening? So you have 3 or 4 newspapers in New York, and you would have all seen the movies, where the little vans and 3-wheelers and so on flying around, throwing out, or the bigger lorries throwing out the bundles of newspaper at the various corners and so on and so forth. That's what we were all growing up watching, those movies and so on. Read all about it, blah blah blah, on the local stands and so on. And basically they all could see, and get it all out, and they were all getting the newspapers out in around the same time. I mean, that was, no one wanted to be half an hour late and so on. Anyway, they could see the threat with internet and so on and so forth. So they said they had to become more efficient and doing it, and they literally came together and said, right, look, hang on a second. Why are we competing on these? We all have our own rounds. We're all using, we all have paper manufacturers, and we all have print presses and this, that, and the other, and so on. So they decided, let's amalgamate all of that side of things and use the same distribution network, use the same printing and the same paper. And really, because what they analyzed was that it wasn't on the speed of the papers getting out. That was non-existent, the difference between them. And it wasn't on the quality of the paper or the size of the print. People were buying papers because of the articles and the particular writers. This is what it came down to. Why would you buy the Irish Independent versus the Irish Times? You have particular columnists and journalists that you follow and so on and so forth, generally speaking. And that's what they came up with a lovely expression, well, I think so anyway, called co-opetition. So they cooperated to a point, and then they competed. They competed through the journalists and the journalistic articles and so on. So that was it. But they save phenomenal amount of money, and that's why a lot of them are still in existence today, because they optimized their operations and supply chain, and then just differentiated. It's analogous to mass customization today, where products, the final customization is deferred to as late in the manufacturing process as possible to enable to benefit from mass production up to a point. Now, where am I going here now? How am I doing time-wise? Right. So supply chain collaboration, so base rationalization.
Mark,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt you there. I know you're probably on time, but I just really want to go away from tonight's session really understanding the depth and breadth of the assignment. So just if you could keep that in mind for your timing.
Okay. Actually, I'm on the second last slide. I'll wrap these up and then I'll talk about the assignment. How's that? Is everyone happy with that? No? Yeah?
Yeah, that works. Thanks.
Sinead is anyway. Okay, no, okay. We'll do a quick overview of the assignment then. Okay, where am I going? Sony aim to cut a supply base from that to that. Suppliers by March 2011 to reduce complexity and costs and so on and so forth. Absolutely. So that gives you an idea of the kind, the levels of rationale or the rationalization, not without compromising quality and so on, to literally improve the turnaround lead times and so on, and get better commitment from their suppliers as such, So yeah, they're the kind of examples. Easier for an OEM to work with a few selected suppliers than work with many suppliers. Kind of makes sense, but the whole point about it is don't work with just one supplier, for crying out loud. That's really what they're a couple, your fail-safe mechanism, your plan B, just in case these things can happen, and they do. What else is here? The last point: aggregated procurement, supplier development can enable improved integration. These are just the summary points. Enabled integration, order processing application for aggregated procurement, IT-based systems essentially. And then aggregated procurement itself. Rather than individual suppliers tendering for particular orders, specific suppliers and selected by suppliers, selection software packages based on their capabilities. Again, and for example, that's where your IT department earns its crust coming in, because you don't want to be buying a massive IT piece of technology that's over-engineered for what you really want. By the same token, you don't want a cheap and cheery version that throttles you, in a year's time or 2 years' time, or give or take. So obviously, you look for you evaluate suitable IT systems and software that are expandable and compatible. And bearing in mind that nowadays, compatibility is only a temporary measure because of the concept of end-of-life products, software, and so on. That's weeded its way in since 2001, I think, was the very first instance where I came across that with Sun Microsystems. And we were shocked and stunned. So we had to go back to our customers and say, by the way, the system we've just put in for you, we're going to have to swap that out in 18 months' time because that particular model has end-of-life and we can't guarantee support by the manufacturers of the high-end computers themselves. So again, but that's now become a way of life, a way of doing business. It was tough dealing in business back then, trying to convince customers, but we were only after spending, $250,000, $500,000, or $2 million on a system. And your time we're going to have to replace this, and this. It's like having to buy a car and you're told that after 12 months you're going to have to change the engine in the car. It doesn't go down too well, but it's become a way of life now. It's almost a given that, and you know yourself, how many of you still have the first washing machine you bought when you got married? It's not a trick question. The early days, you get 20 or 25 years out of a washing machine. You're doing well if you get 5, 6, or 7 years out of a washing machine now. There's an inbuilt clock. Once the warranties run out, they become they self-destruct. Right. I'll
Like
stop.
2 weeks after you're warranty runs out.
Sorry?
Like 2 weeks after your warranty runs out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right. Where am I now? Oh, yes. I want to go into Moodle and just drag up the assignment. I wasn't planning on this, so that's why I don't have it available to me. That's not. Oh, where are we? Assignments. What one is due now? Or what's one is coming? First one is is supply chain assignment. Then you have the case studies, isn't it? I should know. I wrote them.
Can you say that again? Sorry, you broke up a little bit there.
I thought you said column. I was cracking up. Can you hear me?
Can't hear
Can you hear me now?
Breaking up a bit, yeah. Can't hear you if you're speaking.
I'm speaking now. You should be able to hear me now. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's broken a little bit. Is it just me, or is it the same for everyone?
It's the same.
Same for me, Colin.
Same for everyone.
I'll try one more trick. If this doesn't work.
It's all speaking broken sentences and really confusing.
Now can you hear me? You should be able to hear me clearly now.
Your signal looks fine. The strength looks fine. Yeah.
Yeah, you should be able to hear me now perfectly. Good. Let me see. And I have too many web pages open. That's part of the reason. But no, everything is fine on this end.
No, you're breaking up again, Mark.
Okay, and we just project that's true. And hang on a second. Okay, 1 second.
If you just want to talk to the assignment, maybe you don't need to have the screen on behind you, or
No, it's not straight. I'm just I see what's happening here. I'm trying to open the second Word document. It's just taking time to download from Moodle. Because the individual assignment is the first one due to, isn't it? That's due in March. Okay. Oh, come on, Word. Right. Now we should be motoring. Okay. I have the assignments here. Case study.
Mark, you're still breaking up. Sorry.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I haven't been talking.
yes.
You should be able to hear me clearly now.
Oh.
I wasn't talking. That's why. Anyway,
Yes.
okay. Your first assessment is the individual case study. Okay, and I'll stick with the ones that I have already up here. you have, it's a case study. And I've taken the first one by way of example. Now, I'll be changing the cover sheets on these because I've used them elsewhere. In any case, you've got this, what's known as vertical integration versus outsourcing. How handy is that, given what we've spoken about tonight? And you have a case study. The important thing about this is, on your Moodle site, there is a PDF document. Supply Chain Management Challenges, the 21st Century. Okay? And in there, these case studies are written. Okay? They're taken straight from the book. And at the bottom, you have 3 questions. Question 1 carries 40 marks. The other 2 questions, 2 and 3 questions are 30 marks each. And you have to read the case study and answer the questions. That's the basic approach on it. What I need you to do is use the book and read that section. The book is broken down into parts. Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. From memory, I think this is taken from part 1 or 2. So you need to read the whole lot of that part to get an understanding of what's going on and the topic and the subject area. It's the way the book is broken up. But at least I'm not going outside those individual parts. So first things first, onto your PDF document, the 21st Century Supply Chain Management, and look at the structure of the book, and then and you'll find a case study. And the same questions are inside there. So, for example, what are the strategic drivers? So you'll find a model of identifying the strategic drivers, and we pull those out. And then I want you to just back that up with some of the theory that we would have covered in the course, and then give the actual answers out of it. So really, the objective of
Hey, Mark, you were just frozen there for the last minute.
No?
Just maybe if we're going through it again, explain where you're getting all this is in. So,
Yeah. Well, look on the bright side of it.
where the assignment is.
On the upside of this, what I'm saying and visually is being recorded clearly, so it'll all be on the video on Moodle anyway. If you're having trouble now, we'll keep going as is. Can you hear me and see me clearly now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'll come back to
Can you show us where on Moodle?
Look for
where on Moodle this document is.
It's on the front page of Moodle. On the front page of Moodle. Hang on a second. I won't even attempt to share screens because obviously there's problems with the internet. Huh? Sorry?
Sorry, it was for Yvonne. Yvonne, it's underneath the assessments and assignments folder.
Emma, I can't find it there. I can just see to turn it in.
No, if you look at lectures, notes and presentation on the front page of Moodle, lecture notes and class presentations, and you see there's 2 PDF documents. The second one is SCM in the 21st Century. That's a book.
I popped it in the WhatsApp, guys.
Are you following me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a
Okay.
book called SCM Century, right? Okay,
That's it.
Go on, I'm with you so far.
Right. In that book, these case
Are you
studies.
in the right module, Michael? Are you in module 5? Or it's in module 5, not 1.
The one with the dog on the front of it.
Oh. What?
So the module is it's 5, not 1.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
supply chain 5.
Dog, Michael.
Yeah. So then there's an assignments and assessment.
I see that, but when I click in, there's nothing actually there. Just
There.
Yes, in where the dog is. That dog is a piece of shit. And if you go down and you click on that dog, you'll end up on the front page of it's a cross between a Pekingese and a Shih Tzu. It's an actual dog. I call it my K9 COVID. And then and when you go in there, you'll find this straight in front of you, underneath the meeting link and all that. You have this 2 PDF documents. The second one is the big one, which is the supply chain management, SCM in the 21st century. And down below that, if you keep going down, you'll see assessments and assessment and assignments. And then you have a folder called assessment assignments. And you click on that folder and it'll bring you into the actual assignment briefs. Okay. And in there, you'll see a cover page. And then you'll see case study number 1 and case study number 2. And then SCM assignment. So you've got to do 2. You have a choice of case study 1 or case study 2. Do one of them. One of them, it's worth 30%, 35%. And then the individual project assignment, the big one, is 65%. And that's what's known as the SCM assignment, the last one on the list from what I remember seeing there earlier on. So the individual one, you have a choice of either one of those. How to go about this is going into the book, look at the case study, look at the title, and you'll find that same case study. It's taken from the book, and the case study will be within a section or a part of the book. And what I'm trying to get you to do is read that part and digest what the case study is about, and look and then answer the questions based on what you're reading inside in the book and so on. And then of course augment that with some of the theory that we have already and will discuss over the next 2 weeks at least before the assignment is due, give or take. And that's it. That's
Mark, what kind of point are you looking for this?
Say what?
Word count?
Word count. Geez, I think these are usually around 1,500 to 2,000 words.
So which are we doing? The assignment now, and then we do the case studies later on, is it? Or which one do you do first?
No, your
No,
first one.
it's the case study first.
Yeah.
Case study first, and then the assignment is for later on in end of April.
Yeah. When is the case study due?
9th of March.
11th of March.
The 11th of March. 9th of March, yeah.
And it's individual. They're all both individual. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sorry lads, where are you seeing the case study? Because I don't actually see the case study. I see assessments, individual projects.
Maybe if a screenshot can be taken and
Okay, hang on a second. Hang on a second. Hang on a second. I'll do this here. And advanced. And portion of the screen. I should be able to share the screen with you now. Hang on a second. I'll get this across to the screen. And I don't need to show you that. And I don't need that. So can you see that?
No.
What? You should be able to see it. That's
No,
the,
can't read it. Can't read it.
That's your Moodle page that I'm sharing on Zoom.
Yeah, it's blurry, Mark.
Can't help Moodle. And
I can share my screen because I found that I was lost and found. So, do you want me to share my screen there for a second?
Hang on a second. Try and enlarge it. Is that helping any? That's too big. That's way too big. No.
Yeah.
Can you see that now?
It could be a resolution.
It's not. I'm running full HD and I'm getting 30 frames per second, and my average lag time or rendering time is 22 milliseconds. Everything is in the white, in other words.
Maybe it's the way Zoom is displaying it then.
That's why I don't like using Zoom for recordings.
Share my screen there, Mark.
So yeah, this is the shared screen now. You should be seeing something coming up that's of quality there. No?
It's illegible.
Illegible. Don't know. and
Mark, it
that's
hasn't
going
been very bad all night. It's actually worse now.
That's going directly through Zoom. I'm not going through my own system. This is not recorded on my system. This is straight through the internet, and everything, all the parameters are I mean, I've 0.1% of frames dropped out of 500,000 frames recorded tonight. I've only had 600 frames drop, and a frame you wouldn't even see it, obviously, because it's only milliseconds. So
Mark,
I
understand you're seeing the statistics, but we're not seeing the same thing on our end.
yeah.
We haven't had these issues with other lectures either.
Well, you for the most part, the only thing you don't have recorded is on video for later on is this Moodle face page.
Mark, it's just very frustrating, Mark, when we've all set aside time to come tonight to then have to watch a video later on. Like, the purpose of coming tonight is to not have to do that after the fact. So it's very frustrating.
In actual fact, I'm not obliged to record anything. It's only for benefit, for review. Okay, I'll stop sharing and see what happens here.
Everyone's trying their best. I think that's fair. I'm happy to share my screen there, Mark, because I couldn't find it either until people directed me into it. Do you want me to do that just to help the others?
In any case, the end goal is what you're actually doing for your actual assignment. So you have a choice, as I said, to repeat myself on this one again. You have 2 case studies. You need to read the book in this case, and that's showing you where to actually the section in the book. The case studies are to guide you into the book and that section, and you answer the questions on the case study on one of the case studies. So was there something else that you needed to know about the assignment?
Mark, I think it's very confusing on Moodle. Everything we look at says 2020, not 2021. I've seen them case studies before, thinking they were last year's ones. The last time we spoke to you, you committed to giving an update on Moodle, tidying things up. Nothing's changed. And it's quite annoying to come onto a class, told by you then you're not obliged to record things. It's been a disgrace tonight. I couldn't see or hear half of what you were doing. And all you're interested in, by the sounds of things, is the technology behind it and how great things are shown on your side. We're not seeing the same here at all.
And is that the case with everyone?
Yes.
Or just some people? Because I'm kind of getting mixed messages.
Yeah, it's just a blur. The text on the screen is blurry for me.
Yeah.
Echo.
What I will do is I'll go in onto Moodle and I'll change I'll renumber those slides that I'm going to be using and those that I have used, for starters. Other than that, I can't explain the technology.
I think, Mark, maybe if we all just go away from tonight and look up on Moodle what we need to, and we can come back with questions maybe.
Indeed, that's absolutely, by all means, if you have any queries or problems with the assignments, but the best guide I can give you is in that book, and that's exactly where the case studies are coming from. So you just need to do some of that work, yourselves, to read that book, and at least it's provided there, And as I said, you don't need to go through.
Just out of interest, Mark, if I may ask, I mean, are you able to present with all of this technology aside, right? If I think, any of the other, presenters, if you like, are not using whatever weird and wonderful technology you're doing. I'm not saying that it doesn't work in the normal scheme of events, but it seems to me that this is the only difference between the other presenters and yourself, and it's not visible, it's not legible. Is there some way you can just connect direct to the institute, AIT, and present, from Zoom, because it is causing issues, and it may look great and look like a TV studio, but the quality is not there, and that's the only difference that I can see.
That's interesting, and we can be quite sure that it's the time of night as well that's causing problems with it. But I'll have a look. And see what other way I can possibly do this as well. There's always room for improvement.
Mark, is there a document that clearly lays out what's required on each assignment?
Yes, it's the document. It's the assignment brief themselves, the case study.
Okay.
Does that? Have you had any induction on what case studies or assignments or how to approach these, or academic writing or anything like that?
No, we have. Yeah, I just think that the difference here has been where to find the assignments.
Okay, and that's on Moodle under the assignments and assessments, and that folder that has the actual Word documents in there.
We know where they are now.
Okay, and as I said, the most valuable guidance is that the answers are in the book. The questions, the actual assignments themselves, those two case studies are in that book. I just need to go in and scan down through the book, find the and find the case studies. Then that'll clearly identify the section and part of the book that you're in, and just review that section of the book and answer the questions based on what you've just read inside in the book. So it's trawling through that, and that's how we do case studies. Yeah.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Mark. No, that sounds fair. Yeah, it sounds good, man. Thank you.
Okay, though, folks. Listen, we'll leave it at that. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time, please God.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Bye.
Okay. Night and night. Take it easy.
Night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.